will build a future where no one needs to come out anymore. Together, we can create a world where everyone has the right to love, to succeed, to have a family, and to live a full, happy life. Our guest today is Sam Evergham, and I will invite him to introduce himself. Sam?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sam Evergham, and I'm the founder of Families Through Surrogacy. I'm a gay dad and have 2 girls via surrogacy who were born over 7 years ago now. We had quite a tough journey having a family via cross-border surrogacy. So I started an organisation to help people, firstly in Australia about 8 years ago, and in the last 4 or 5 years, a global one that does education and seminars, conferences and consultation around the world to help people navigate surrogacy arrangements.
Wow, that's quite impressive. And if may I add, sounds really complex.
The issue is they're quite complicated, and we gay intending dads, it's much harder these days because the laws change in some countries. Places that were open to surrogacy in the past, like India, where we had our girls, and like Thailand and Nepal are now closed to surrogacy, so it makes it harder. People can spend a lot of money on arrangements and have no success if they don't know what they're doing. So we try and help them with information and advice and first-hand experience.
I see. Is it safe to say that your personal experience motivated you to create this organization and inspire you to help others?
That's right, yeah.
That's fantastic and so inspiring. So let's talk about the surrogacy process. What are the steps? What is it that you recommend to someone that is considering this option and they don't even know from where to start?
Yeah, look, it's really important to talk to other families who've used surrogacy, who've used maybe agencies you're thinking of using. So we encourage people to go onto websites like Families Through Surrogacy, which have sort of reviews of providers, to attend events where they can talk to parents who've used surrogacy, to try and get a better understanding of what the real costs are, and to meet some other surrogates if they can. Often people who need a surrogate haven't met a surrogate before, so that's really important for them to know, understand the kind of woman they'll be working with and the kind of issues. So the more reading you can do about it by reading blogs of parents who've already done surrogacy journeys, that's a useful resource. And also making sure they understand the laws in the countries they're engaging in. Some countries where gay singles and couples do surrogacy now don't have laws in place, but they're more popular because they're cheaper. Places like Mexico and Kenya and Laos are open to surrogacy for gay couples, but they don't have regulation and infrastructure to protect you. So we really try and encourage people, if they can, to do surrogacy in their own country, if they're in the US states or in the UK or Australia. But many countries in Europe don't allow surrogacy domestically, so we know they have to go overseas for that. So that's really about understanding where they can do that safely.
In your talks a couple of months ago at the conference in Australia, you mentioned about the importance of providing good support to surrogates. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So if you're going to do surrogacy in your own country and you're not going to use an agency, so it's called independent surrogacy, and that's quite popular in the UK, in Australia, and in some parts of America, then you really need to make sure you can support your surrogate well, because she's not being paid money to carry, and she needs a lot of extra support with her own children often, and with her emotions, and with coming to appointments. And, that can be really hard. Some intending parents are prepared for that or unaware of that, and they maybe live a long way away from their surrogate and they can't offer the kind of support she needs. So we do try and encourage people who are looking at doing surrogacy independently to try and do it with surrogates who are close by, who live in the same town or city as them or close to that, or otherwise to engage a surrogacy agency who can support the surrogate better. Often the toll on their bodies is much, much higher than they thought it would be. Their own pregnancies were often easier, but their surrogacy pregnancy might be their 3rd or 4th, and they often find they have worse morning sickness, they have worse side effects of medication. It can be tough, so they need support.
Yes, they do. Like any other the pregnant women.
Yeah.
So many years ago, I used to work in insurance, and pregnant women were considered high risk. No one can predict how a pregnancy will develop, regardless if you are surrogate or not.
Exactly. It's very true. And I mean, she has to rely on her partner. If she has one for that support often, if she has an agency support worker to help her, then that makes a big difference. But, it can be very hard. And often the surrogates don't even realise how hard it will be. Part of our education we do, the surrogates themselves need education before they go ahead. Some of them come into this with quite rose-coloured glasses, and they assume it will be all easy. So we have to part of our job is to let them know that, well, actually it can be hard.
It can be hard. And I could only imagine that it could be hard for the intended parents as well. Are you okay with sharing a little bit about that from your own experience?
Yeah, that's fine. We started looking at surrogacy about 9 years ago in India. Well, back then there wasn't really surrogacy available in Australia, and we thought the USA was too expensive. We'd met some other families who'd done surrogacy in India and they'd had success.
Okay.
And it was not too far away for us to go. We engaged there, we put some trust in an agency there, and it was a difficult process. We were going pretty blind without much information, and we were convinced to transfer 2 or 3 or 4 embryos at a time, and that eventually led after 4 or 5 transfers to a twin pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Don't let you know the sex of the children in India until the birth. Mm-hmm. Then we received a call maybe at 26 weeks pregnancy gestation that the surrogate was in labour. They had to be induced.
Oh no.
And Zach was stillborn, and Ben went to intensive care, but Ben only survived 7 weeks and he died. And so look, it made me realise that there are lots of risks to this process, and we needed education. We obviously grieved, and we went on. We had 2 girls later on via surrogacy, but it taught me the fact that lots of parents weren't being supported and weren't educated about the risks. And so that's really how I started doing education work because of that. So it's been rewarding since then. And, our girls are now, over 7 years old and they're blossoming. But it was a hard process at the start. And I'd seen many other couples go through similar grief because they'd had their surrogates miscarry, or they had miscarried, or they had other issues go wrong during the pregnancy. So we try and help prevent that these days with the work we do.
I'm sorry for your loss. How do you find the courage and the strength to start all over again after such an experience?
Look, it was hard. I went through a lot of grief at the time and depression, and we didn't know if we could start again. We thought, well, maybe we could. Time we didn't really want to hope it would even work. Because it was been through so much loss already. But look, we put a hope one more time that maybe we'd have one more go at this. And I realised that unless you're determined, sometimes these things don't happen. But I've seen many other couples who've gone through similar obstacles, and they've kept going. Usually things work out for them. It taught me that you need to be determined, and you have to deal with your grief and keep going when you're ready.
That's so beautiful. Is it something that you did differently second time around?
Do differently? Mm-hmm. I'd make sure people did a single embryo transfer. I think that's important for the health of the surrogate and the health of the baby. I'd make sure I'm dealing with an agency who I know is caring for the surrogate, where we can have contact with the surrogate during the pregnancy. I think that's really important. It was also important, I think, to know who your egg donor is, where you have information about them and are able to contact them if you can. Some countries don't allow that. They don't allow contact with the donor. So I think it can be important for some children to know a bit about their egg donor, so that's important.
Mm-hmm. So people use an egg from somebody they know, or they opt for an egg bank?
That's right. And increasingly people bring along their own egg donor if they know a girlfriend who's happy to donate eggs. But then often people think, I don't know women of the right age. A good egg donor needs to be under 35 years old and had children already, be a very healthy woman. So sometimes people need an egg bank, that's right. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of those in the USA, and some other countries have many of them.
That's fantastic. And talking about babies, how is it to raise 2 twins? They're twins, right?
Yeah, they're twins.
So how is it to have a family of 2 dads raising 2 girls, 7 years old, right?
Yeah. Look, it's been great. It changed our life enormously. We always wanted a family, and we were a fairly home-based couple. We didn't go out a lot. So having family to teach and teach us things, it's been a great experience. And we wouldn't change that. Initially, we thought maybe we would foster children, but that was very hard in Australia. So the surrogacy has been a great alternative to that for us, and it's given us a biological link to the kids. And it's been wonderful getting to know other parents with kids the same age, and realise there are lots of gay dad families, lots of rainbow families in Australia and around the world.
That is so great to hear. I'm I'm so happy for you, and I'm so happy for your goals. And I'm curious, how do you explain, if you did already or if you're not, how you will tell them how come that they have two dads and no mom?
So this is a really good question. So we found it was very important to have a story, their life story, a real one for them. Mm-hmm. So we took lots of pictures at the birth of their egg donor and their surrogate, and have a photo album with their story in it for each of the girls. And they were able to read that from when they are, 4 years old. We start showing them the pictures and showing them their egg donor and their surrogate, and they know that's their story and they're proud of that story because they've known it from when they were young. And, we'll take them back to India soon and hopefully meet their surrogates again. So it was very important to us and to them that they know where they came from and they have some affinity with India.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
So, yeah, it's important for them. They're quite proud of the fact that they have two dads.
I love it. So it's just having two dads. It's all it is, not question about why there is no mom.
Sometimes they say, oh, why don't I have a mum? Because all their friends at school have a mum.
Right.
And so, but they're really just pulling a leg because they understand really that they have two dads instead.
Mm-hmm. Now, big question. Who's braiding the hair?
My partner, he's a bad buddy. I'm pretty bad at it, yeah. So I try, but I'm not very good.
Okay.
Now the girls can start doing it themselves now. One of them's really good at doing it herself.
Helping each other, right?
Yeah. That's right.
That's great. And seriously, I really love how you guys created a story and captured the pictures and just let them know where they're coming from. It's just so beautiful and it's so inspiring. And I just have deepest appreciation for you as parents, giving all the challenges and efforts that you made in order to have a family.
Yeah, it has to be very well planned. You don't go into it unless you're planning a long time ahead because there are lots of moving parts. You need to think about who's going to be the egg donor, who's going to be surrogate, who's going to have time off work to bring up the kids. You're suddenly looking at modern families, different forms of families that are newer for people.
Right.
But, you adjust and you realise that it's in many ways the same as a heterosexual couple. You just have those roles where one of the dads stays at home and one goes to work.
Right. And you mentioned about, how you have to plan everything, like who's the egg donor and who's the surrogate, but also is like, how do you make a decision which sperm do you use? Who's the DNA?
That's right. And sometimes dads hope they will have one child with each of their sperm. Often that's not possible. They try and it's not successful. Sometimes one of the dads doesn't want to use his sperm. Mm-hmm. But often they're able to have one child of each if they're lucky.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What is it that you will advise or recommend a couple that are deciding to go through surrogacy in order to create their own family?
I'd get them to talk to other couples who've been through it, to get them to look at how much they can afford to spend on this process, because it can cost much more money than you think if you're not careful. So you need to plan carefully financially, look at where you're going to get funds from for it, and look at sort of what country you can do it in based on your budget, and what sort of relationship you want with your surrogate is very important. If you want a surrogate who you can be close to, it might be better to do it in a country like the USA or Canada, where the surrogates might speak your language, as opposed to a country where they don't speak English. So, there's lots of factors to look at. Your egg donor is an important factor to look at. Do you have a female friend to be a donor for you? We get some couples in Europe where they have their sister agrees to be the surrogate. Because it's illegal in Europe to do it, they take their sister or their girlfriend to the USA for the transfer. And then she might come back and carry the child in Europe, but the IVF has to be done in Canada or USA.
I see. And that made me think about immigration issue that we are running into, because whatever country that child is born, that is his citizenship, right?
Well, that's another issue that gay intended parents need to think about, is what's going to be the citizenship for the child. And that's complicated depending on what country they're born in. If they're born in Canada or the US, they get citizenship of that country automatically. But if they're born in another country, it depends. You need to get advice from an organisation like us or a lawyer, because it can get complex.
Yes, absolutely. Great recommendation. So to recap, they need to organize the funds, find the surrogate, decided who's going to provide with the egg, person that they know or an egg bank, and lawyer up to make sure that all the paperwork are handled accordingly. We might talk about immigration, or I assume that there is some contracts to be signed in the process.
Yeah, that's right.
And be ready for unexpected events to occur.
That's right. That's a good list. Yeah. Yeah. So we try and help them with those things. We do some consultation to help people with those things. But that's a very good list. People should think about. Pregnancies don't always go to plan. Miscarriages are quite common. Often you do embryo transfer and it doesn't take. You might need to do 2 or 3 or more transfers before it takes.
It's a lot of unpredictability and no guarantees.
This isn't an area where you pay your money and it works. It's involving some parts of luck and some parts of planning. So you need to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that in some situation when it's coming to transfer the embryo, it's needed to do 2 or 3 transfers. Is it common to have surrogates changing their mind in these situations?
More common in countries like Australia and the UK, where it's altruistic surrogacy. So the surrogate changes their mind after a few failed transfers. In places like the USA, where they're compensated more money, they tend to be better screened. Mm-hmm. Having said that, we get many Australian surrogates who are very keen to keep going. And it might be the intending parents who change their mind and they say, look, we can't keep going.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. And let's share your website, because might be there are people that want to find out more or want to contact you.
Yeah. They can go to our website, sort of familiestroughsurrogacy.com, and we have seminars and conferences in Sweden and Ireland and UK and lots of resources on the website for people to look at as well. We do consultations with gay intending dads around the world. Many of those people are single men who want to have a baby and they haven't found a partner, but they're ready to have a family.
Right. Or could be heterosexual, right? But they just have medical conditions.
Often, yeah, very common.
Good. Well, before we part here today, is it anything else that you want to add?
Look, I think it's just important for people to realise there's support out there from organisations like ours. We can help them make this an easier process, and we want to try and help them have the families they've longed for. So make sure they know they're not alone. We're here to help.
That's so wonderful. In closing, I just want to thank you for all the work that you do in the world, and I really appreciate for taking the time to be here with us today.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. That's wonderful.
Thank you for tuning in to Redefine Family, a Spark Transformation podcast. Feel free to share your story, knowing that your story could change someone's life. We invite you to spread the love by sharing our message with others. And leave your comments at spark@redefinefamily.com. Until next time, remember that you are the spark in your life. Just shine bright.